Many of the insurgencies that you describe in the book and that you've talked about tonight tend to be uprisings by a people or a group against the government of the place where they live, and are a place that has been occupied by that government or that state, as was the case for the United States in Iraq or in Afghanistan. But now, many of the questions that face the United States seem to be these issues of what should the role of the United States be in dealing with someone else's insurgency, as in Syria or many of the other places in the world that are so hot right now. How do you apply these lessons to that particular framework of an insurgency?
That's a very good question. I think the lessons are universal. The question is, who applies those lessons? Obviously, in the last decade, the United States Army and Marine Corps have been at the forefront of applying those lessons in Iraq and Afghanistan, because in both cases, we invaded those countries, we destroyed their existing regime, and we essentially left a condition of chaos and lawlessness, which could only be filled in the short term by American troops. Now, that is something that I hope will be a fairly rare occurrence in the future. Certainly, I think most folks in this country would hope it would be a rare occurrence in the future, but that doesn't mean that the need to understand the principles of insurgency and counterinsurgency is going to go away, because whether it's Americans on the front lines or Pakistanis or Yemenis or Somalis or French or Libyans or whoever, the same lessons apply. The American role may shift, but the same lessons apply. And in many of these other countries where we're not going to have a large troop deployment, our primary role is going to be acting as advisors and suppliers of arms. And what we want to do as those advisors is to shape the local security forces in ways so that they can fight effectively using the time-tested precepts of counterinsurgency, which in many cases means limiting their brutality, making them understand that simply killing a lot of people is not going to make the insurgency go away. And in fact, it may create more enemies than you eliminate. And there are actually some very good models of how the U.S. has done this successfully in places like El Salvador in the 1980s, or more recently in Colombia, which has been one of the great success stories in counterinsurgency, where the U.S. has spent several $billion under Plan Colombia, but limited our ground presence to a few dozen special forces. That's a pretty good model if we can emulate that in other parts of the world.